Hello and welcome to another Hot Topic. This week I'm joined by Margret Pinder, a musician, lawyer, ex-mayor of Beverley in the Labour interest, I think.
Yes, and parliamentary candidate in the Labour interest in 2015.
Let's start off with a bit of the big picture thing going on from the most recent news about the European Union. Lord Kerr, who's the diplomat who drafted Article 50 of the Lisbon Treaty, which we have triggered in order to leave the European Union, says that that article can be reversed. Is this, and this is an objective diplomat rather than a politician saying this, is that a possibility?
Is it a possibility or is that legally correct?
Well, I'll go for legally.
I think that is quite correct, yes. I think that is quite correct. Whether it would happen that's the big question at the moment. Is there the will to do it? At the moment, both the major parties, Conservative and Labour, are saying that they will go ahead with Brexit. Obviously, Theresa May has been quite adamant about it. There's been all the fuss about the papers, the 58, I think, papers in different sectors, that it's been decided they should be published, and now suddenly they don't exist, apparently. So that's all quite interesting. I suspect, I was actually at a briefing in Number 10 a couple of weeks ago with Gavin Barwell, her Chief of Staff, Theresa May's Chief of Staff, and I asked this very topic, this very question, what about these papers? Why are they not being published? Because if the news is good, why not publish them? And if the news is bad, should we not know this now? And his answer was, well, we're not showing our negotiating a hand to the other side. But all that information is information that's available to the other side, so I didn't really quite buy that.
So and it tends to be, they're not going to show their negotiating hand to the other side, which can deduce it anyway.
Which can figure it out
But they won't
anyway,
share it with the people they're representing in the negotiation.
Whose money tax dollars have paid for those reports. I think it's, I suspect they're going to make Stephen King look like a romance writer because the news, I've seen a couple of independent reports in different sectors, and the news is really quite alarming. I have to come out as a very ardent Europhile, and I've voted Remain, and I feel very strongly that we should reverse. So we should reverse Article 50, and I'm very disappointed that my own party is not taking that stance. So I'm declaring an interest there.
No, well, we'll come back to the Labour Party position in a moment, but just to get, again, sorry, forgive me, I'm not going to give you 100 guineas an hour or anything for picking your brains as a lawyer, but just in terms of the jurisprudential aspect of this, Lord Kerr can say what he likes as a diplomat, that Article 50 can be rescinded. But when you say can it be, de jure, legally rescinded, who's going to decide? That's the paradox, isn't it? Is it going to be a British court that might decide that, or is it going to be a European court that might decide it?
What decides on the legal point?
Yeah.
Well, ultimately, we're still in the EU. We're still subject to the European Court of Justice, but there is also an international court as well, a wider international court. I don't think it would get that far. Every constitutional battle the government's tried to fight over this whole issue about whether it has to go to Parliament, they have lost spectacularly. And
including
I don't know,
in Britain's domestic courts.
Yes, in Britain's domestic courts. It's gone to the Supreme Court. That very distasteful headline saying the judges were enemies of the people when they'd actually made a perfectly proper constitutional decision.
It's down to the Daily Mail, that one.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Lord Dacre. And so I wonder if the government actually has the stomach to go back to the court again when chances are they probably would lose. The issue, therefore, is not legally is it correct, because I think it is, but is there the will to do it and how it would be rescinded? And I think it would have to be a vote of Parliament, but whether it would be enough to have a vote of Parliament, whether the feeling would be that there should be a second referendum, it's all up in the air at the moment.
That vote in Parliament is unlikely, though, isn't it, unless there's another election or a change of government between now and March 2019?
Well, at the moment, if it were to happen tomorrow, I would say, no, the vote is going to be not on should we, shouldn't we anymore, just how do we do it, the amendments to the current bill, which Theresa May is trying to force the hand and saying, I want it set in stone, that the date, that the date will be the date when it happens.
And the time, indeed,
yes.
Which is a dramatic little flourish, isn't it?
Yes.
11 o'clock GMT. Let's just give the talks. This is one of these sort of brief periods in the month where the David Davis, Bulldog Brexit Davis, has gone over to Brussels to negotiate with Michel Barnier, and it's still the same three issues that the European Union insists on talking about before going on to talk about trade, customs, anything else. Northern Irish border, the payment that the British might owe in order to fulfil our obligations there, previously made obligations there, and the rights of EU citizens in the UK and UK citizens in the EU. Now, will it not come down to a matter of each individual government in the 27 countries of the EU to decide what the rights are of UK citizens over there?
No, I don't think so, not while they remain within the EU, because those are issues that the EU decides for its member nations. So you can't have individual member nations deciding unilaterally what the border terms would be and what their terms of residence would be. I can't see that. That simply just doesn't wash. The whole thing, you can't, I don't see, the argument, a hard Brexit we're talking about, either no deal or a hard Brexit is no deal with outside the customs union, absolutely no connection with the EU at all, but then still wanting to have a soft border. You can't have it all ways. You can't leave a club but then still want the benefits, which is what we're, so everyone's sort of dancing round at the moment.
But in terms of rights of residence and rights to work and rights to healthcare and things like that, then if the UK offers EU citizens an easy way to stay,
yes, but that it would have to be that way. But I think it would have to be accepted by the EU, and then the requirement would pass to the member states within the EU. I don't think the British government could come to individual agreements with, say, Poland or Bulgaria. I mean, that just doesn't wash. That's not going to work. I mean, I think we should offer them the rights they have now to remain and reside. These people, Sadiq Khan spoke very well at the CBI lunch in London last month to say these people are our colleagues and our friends, and they are also vital to our economy and our businesses.
And our services.
Exactly.
You're an old veteran of negotiations. Was it wise to accept that these three issues, the Northern Irish border, the bill and citizens' rights, that they have to be settled before there can be any further discussion of trade, customs, markets, things like that?
Yes, I think so, because I think the EU is protecting its citizens. There's the citizens who will remain after that. The Irish border it's a really tricky one, actually, because you see, that's not the only difficult one. It's obvious because there's an immediate land border. And, of course, one reason we were never part of the Schengen Agreement was because that's the only contiguous land border we have with any other EU member state. So that is a very particular case unto itself. And I think that has to be decided, because you can't just blunder on it. It then becomes the elephant in the room. I mean, the whole issue of our borders is going to become a nightmare anyway. Talking about queues at Dover. I mean, it's pretty tough as it is, without making it more difficult with having to bring in border regulation and border controls over and above what we already have. But I think, yes, it is very important. The matter of the money to the EU, it's a case of, it's not why should we pay to leave? It's these are obligations we made commitments to, and you can't just walk away and say, well, I'm not paying anymore. You set we agreed to this for a long-term plan. Those things have been put in place on the understanding our money we would be providing a certain amount of the money. You can't just walk away and go, well.
Just to bring this home a little more locally now, there's been suggestions last week by the fish trading industry and fish processing industry in Grimsby and Immingham that there should be a sort of free port status around here. There were people been lobbying in Parliament last week that Grimsby and Immingham should not have to have any sort of tariff, any difference whatsoever in its trading terms with the continent in terms of fish. That fish, that take 3 days to get to Grimsby from Calais, for instance, are probably not going to be at their best, and that Grimsby should be like some sort of Gdansk between the wars and a free port with no barriers whatsoever.
Well, I think that's interesting because, of course, Grimsby was one of the areas that I think voted quite heavily to leave.
It's about 69.9% voted in North East Lincolnshire to depart.
So I think they've got a fairly bad case of buyer's regret, which I have great sympathy with, because we could be here all night talking about whether the referendum should have been held, what the terms on which it was held, the information that was out there. I think there are two questions here that are quite interesting. I understand why they would want that. But again, if that's what you want, why are you leaving a union that gives you that anyway? You've already got it. Why do you want to go somewhere that takes it away from you, if only to then renegotiate getting back? It seems a bit...
complicated.
Sort of, yes, that's complicated. Yes, it's a very, very good term for that. Another thing it feeds into, which is a bit of a topic off to the side, but I'll mention it quickly because I think it's quite interesting. Lots of talk about devolution, which is Yorkshire devolution, and I have always maintained that actually the better area for devolved economic region is actually the Humber region with the Humber port.
Well, we'll come up
with that, but I was just saying off the back of that, I just wanted to flag that up because I think that's an interesting
after
topic.
the break, Margaret. We'll stop there. Join me again in a couple of minutes. Welcome back. I'm still with Margret Pinder, and we were just finishing, I think, talking about the nature of the relationship with the European Union as it affects this area. Local devolution, though, Margaret, seems to be, I don't want to advertise any brand names here, but a bit of a Horlicks. Yorkshire can't seem to agree to get its act in gear, and the local authorities there can't seem to agree with it. Lincoln, the various local authorities of Lincolnshire have been effectively vetoed by the county council as far as any sort of devolution and accepting of a great big cash present from the government is concerned there. Why can't anybody sort this out?
Well, I think it's too much of a cultural shift. The idea making devolution geographic makes sense in some cases, for example, Wales, Scotland, because they are very, they're clearly defined nations. Once you start getting devolution of the regions, I think you run up against two problems. One is, as a proud Yorkshire woman, that's all fine when you're outside Yorkshire. The minute you get within Yorkshire, then you can start fighting amongst yourselves quite grandly. So North Yorkshire does not necessarily have a lot in common with West Yorkshire and East Yorkshire. Likewise, and you get into Hull and you don't even start on East and West Hull. So do you see what I mean? It becomes very tribal. It becomes very, very tribal.
Well, in that case, would not the solution be to have even smaller units of devolution, like some sort of Holy Roman Empire, and have mini little duchies and principalities? And that if we're such nationalists, or
yes.
such
and then look for our second Bismarck.
Such parochialists that we can't be friends with people we can't be in the same economic union with people 22 miles away across the channel. Perhaps the logic of that is that we have to have much smaller units, possibly even of sovereignty.
Now you're being provocative. But part of the problem we have in this country is that economically we are so London-centric. If you look at somewhere like Germany, which I admit is a federal state, and we're not federal, but there's an aspect of federal thinking that's quite useful, in that they don't have any one great city that is the centre of everything. They have large cities, Munich, Berlin, Frankfurt. These big cities have their own weight. There's nothing in this country that can stand up against London. This relentless sort of suction of energy, economic power into the southeast is very hard to resist, and we've had it so long. It's very hard to suddenly think in regional terms, because to have a devolution mindset, you have to have in effect a mindset that's similar to a federal mindset. We've never had it. It'll take a long time to develop it, and suddenly you go, devolution, fantastic, Yorkshire, because we had a vote in Yorkshire, and it was, turned down like a bedspread. So it's... There are big cultural issues. I think it probably sounded great when, the likes of George Osborne thought, we've got to better look as though we care about the North. And what can we do? Well, we can tell them, you get on with it.
He was a Northern MP.
Yes, he was. Yes, you could tell.
Although he is now a London newspaper editor.
He is now a London newspaper editor, yes. I was discussing that actually with Caroline at the Director General of the CBI at the Yorks and Humber dinner. I pointed out to her, up here we call it the CBI. But, devolution was part of the speech she was giving, and it may be a hot topic, but it's not an easy one at all. Not an easy one.
You mentioned the sucking effect of London. They're getting much more money on their transport infrastructure, much more money per head. It'd be understandable they get much more money because there are a lot more of them than there are people in
but
Yorkshire.
It is. You have to look at it per head.
It's many times per head much more money. What are our representatives in London failing to do to get the money up here, to attract it up here?
They're probably failing to belong to the party in power with the hands on the purse strings, I think. It's been chronically underfunded. The work I do for the law firm I work for takes me between our London, Liverpool and Manchester offices in this country. And travelling to London, which is about 70 miles further away than Liverpool, is so much easier. I can get on a through train from Beverley at 6 in the morning and walk into the office pretty much just after 9:30. If I want to go to Liverpool, it takes me at least one change, sometimes two, and can take me anything from 3.5 to 2 hours, 3.5 to 4 hours. You know, that doesn't make any sense in a working day to spend 8 hours. And well, I'm not on trains with Wi-Fi. These are not these are commuter trains. It's ridiculous. Late 19th century, we had a direct line between Hull and Liverpool for the transmigrants coming over from Hamburg and passing on to America. We could do it in the late 19th century, but don't seem to be able to do it now.
But so you're advocating an HS3, as it were, that sort of northern powerhouse idea of a direct train route from Hull straight across to Liverpool. That's
yes.
with the kindest will in the world. That's an awful lot of billions of pounds to spend to make your commute a little bit easier.
The lines are there. I'm not asking for new lines. The lines are there, but the routes don't seem to be able to run. I can get to Manchester directly from Hull. That's very good, the Transpennine Hull. I wish there were better trains with Wi-Fi, because for me, if I'm commuting, when I get on the train, I'm in my office. I start working. So it's not that the train lines are not there. It's the quality of the track. It's the quality electrification which was going to come to Hull and keeps edging further and further back away from Hull.
Well, the new trains don't need electrification, is my understanding. They have new rolling stock which no longer requires the electrification.
Well, this I keep wondering about. I keep hearing different things. I don't care if they're steam driven. I don't care. You know, at the moment I feel as though I have to get an ox cart to go to my Liverpool office. Please, why? You know, there's Chris Grayling, who, having just announced he wanted to spend something like 300 million on the other Crossrail in London.
Yes.
Crossrail in London. Came up to Yorkshire and then said basically, well, you need to sort it out yourselves. And then wonders why, it's quite hard to make friends up here.
Well, one of the other great infrastructure projects is the cruise terminal at Hull. People from both parties have been advocating that. Is Hull really ever going to compete with Naples and Valencia and Lisbon as a cruise destination? I mean, I love Hull, and it's a fine and wonderfully cultural town.
Actually, yes, I think it would, for these reasons. And I speak because my law firm is actually one of the top law firms in cruise. I know quite a lot about cruise, actually.
I'm glad I asked.
Yes. My parents took a cruise from Hull early this year on the Marco Polo. So Hull is useful because Newcastle is also a big departure port for cruises. It's not necessarily the appeal of the city itself, although I think after the City of Culture year, it really has impressed a lot of people who've come to visit and said, wow, we never realised, all the stuff we've heard about Hull, and it's actually a pretty great city. But as a point of departure for Baltic cruises up to St. Petersburg, it's a really good jumping off point for Northern Europe. So I think it's not that it's necessarily a cruise destination, but it's actually quite a good starting point.
So that's Hull, gateway to the fjords.
Yes.
I want to move on quickly again. Sorry to pick your legal brain. We'll come back to other things as well. But another big story at the moment is all sorts of people are being accused, rightly or wrongly, I have no idea, of behaving appallingly badly to women, occasionally to men as well, at the moment. And there are one or two issues that arise from this. Firstly, we are innocent until proved guilty.
Yes.
That's a fundamental of the
English law.
When you say we. Or unless
yes. One is.
A better preposition to use.
Yes.
I've been reading in some of the print media, but especially about Harvey Weinstein, who's clearly an exceptionally vile man.
Yes.
That sort of imagine what the experience it must be to be approached in this way by such a fat and ugly man. Now, I imagine it would be an absolutely appalling experience, but the implication is, and the people writing this are not lawyers, that on conviction of some offence of serious sexual assault, that it would be a matter of mitigation on sentencing that the culprit is slim and handsome.
Yes, it's quite extraordinary. I found that aspect of it quite extraordinary. I mean, in legal terms, it shouldn't make any difference. I mean, in terms of what you think in the story, the actual, if you're trying to identify with the experience of the victim, it does give you that extra, yuck factor. But it shouldn't make any difference legally at all.
And is that just then a suggestion that journalism has completely misunderstood this whole issue?
Well, I think the journalists do have a tendency to be mischievous. And I do think the problem is with many stories, the minute sex wanders into it, all bets are off, and it ratchets up a certain
especially
level of rhetoric,
press.
Especially the British press.
Finally, one final thing. You're a musician, which is probably what we should have been talking about for the last 20 minutes.
Yes. I love the segue from sexual harassment into music.
Well, I hope that there's not too much connection between the two. But has the City of Culture satisfied you as a musician?
Yes, it's been absolutely terrific. I mean, I play in the Hull Fill, double bass in the Hull Fill. No, there's not much scope for sexual harassment now. You're too busy trying to control the damn thing. It has. We commissioned a work from Carl Jenkins that we performed in February, which was for the organ in the City Hall. We're repeating it this coming February. But it's not just what we've experienced musically. We've had the volunteers come to our concerts. We're playing open rehearsals for them as a thank you, and they're really enjoying it. There's been so much going on. I mean, the opening of the new theatre, with the ballet, the opera. I'd love to see Opera North come back. They used to come to Hull and they stopped. And I hope they will put us back on the itinerary. Obviously, I'm a classical musician, but Hull's always actually had quite a really vibrant cultural scene. It's just been allowed to come to the fore more. It's had more showcasing. We've always been a very cultured city.
Well, let's hope that
very cultured city.
The legacy, as people call it, the legacy continues.
Yes. Yes. Holy Moly and the Crackers at the Adelphi tonight. Local band, Margret, local venue.
Thank you for the advertising at the end there, Margret. Thank you very much. Join me again next week.